I will call to order the May 2nd, 2024 meeting of the Santa Barbara Local Agency Information Commission. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Commissioner Freeman,
Here.
Commissioner Guyer,
Here.
Commissioner Hartman,
Here.
Commissioner Kiriakou, Commissioner Magana, Commissioner Nelson, Commissioner Osborne, Commissioner Patino, Commissioner Richardson,
Here.
Commissioner Stark, Commissioner Williams.
Can you guys hear us?
Now we can. If I can go through our roll call
We
again.
cannot hear you.
If we could take a brief break.
All right, due to technical difficulties, we will be redoing the roll call.
Commissioner Freeman,
Here.
Commissioner Guyer,
Here.
Commissioner Hartman,
Here.
Commissioner Kiriako,
Here.
Commissioner Magana,
Here.
Commissioner Nelson,
Here.
Commissioner Osborne,
Here.
Commissioner Patino.
Here, and I can see you.
Perfect. Commissioner Richardson,
Here.
Commissioner Stark,
Here.
Commissioner Williams.
Here.
All right, if you'd all please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. The next item of business is the approval of minutes from the April 4th, 2024 meeting.
Move approval?
Second.
Motion by Hartman, second by Kiriako. We have a roll call.
Commissioner Guyer, Commissioner Guyer, Commissioner Hartman,
Aye.
Commissioner Kiriako,
Aye.
Commissioner Patino,
Aye.
Commissioner Stark,
Aye.
Commissioner Williams,
Aye.
Chair Freeman.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously.
Now is the time for members of the public to speak on items that are not on the agenda. Madam Clerk, are there any requests to speak on items not on the agenda?
Chair Freeman and members of the commission, we have no requests to speak under general public comment.
That concludes public comment. Moving on to the approval of the consent calendar. Any items that commissioners would like to pull? Seeing nothing, is there any?
Move approval?
Was there any public comment?
Chair Freeman and members of the commission, there are no requests to speak on this item.
Okay, I'd entertain a motion.
Move approval?
Motion by Hartman, second by Stark. Moving on to a roll call.
Commissioner Guyer,
Aye.
Commissioner Hartman,
Aye.
Commissioner Kiriako,
Aye.
Commissioner Patino,
Aye.
Commissioner Stark,
Aye.
Commissioner Williams,
Aye.
Chair Freeman.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously.
Okay, the next item is business item number 1. Will the clerk please read that item into the record?
Chair, before we go there, may I remind the commission that we do have a commissioner meeting on Zoom for this meeting that is voting, and so we would like Commissioner Williams to declare his exception and statement of whether or not somebody's over 18 in the room with him, so that we can get that on the record.
Yeah, there is nobody over the age of 18 with me in the room. I am here under a Brown Act exemption for sickness.
All right. Will the clerk please read business item number 1 into the record?
Chair Freeman and members of the commission, business item number 1 is to consider recommendations regarding the final budget for fiscal year 2024-2025 and to consider adoption of a resolution.
Thank you. Executive Officer to report.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Commission. This is our item for our final recommended budget for fiscal year 24-25. As we indicated in April, there's typically a two-stage process for LAFCO to adopt its budget. We are an independent commission that evaluates our workload and decides what it was required to carry out that. And so in April, the commission considered a draft budget, and then you gave direction to send that budget out to the member agencies, which is the county, the cities, and the special districts, for comment and feedback. So we exercised that information to them, and we are now back to adopt our final budget. The final budget has to be approved by at least June 15th. The final budget mirrors the proposed budget from our April meeting. There was no changes from the time we heard it, the commission heard it from April until today's hearing. So it's still at 592,000, minor increase of roughly 4%. The reasons for the increase are the same: small staff CPI increase, cover cost for cost allocation plan, slight increase in legal fees, and the use of contingency reserve to offset those for member agencies. Here's a breakdown in this slide as comparison to last year's. I'll note a typo in this third column there. It says proposed 23-24. That's actually 24-25, the new numbers. And so that's how we derive at total appropriations of $592,000 for this year. As part of the attachment Exhibit A, it's the final breakdown of the budget spreadsheet. I wanted to take a little bit of time to kind of explain this. In between our April meeting and today's meeting, we did hear from a couple of member agencies, a city and special districts, kind of asking how is LAFCO's budget kind of packaged and put together, and specifically they wanted to know what their specific LAFCO fee was going to be for the given year. And so I wanted to explain a little bit about that. And so ultimately, if you look at this graphic, the top bars is our revenue stream, and ultimately the other governmental agency column is the member agency's contributions towards the LAFCO fee. That is divided into thirds. So the county pays 1/3, the cities collectively pay 1/3, and the special districts pay 1/3 of that budget. So that would be $184,800 as a 1/3 amount. And after the commission adopts this budget, what typically happens is we now have to forward this on to the county auditor's office. The county auditor then uses a report filed with the state controller's office of each of the cities and the special districts, their total revenues that they reported to the state. The auditor then takes that reported revenue and parcels that out to a per share apportionment. So there's a percentage that's assigned to that $184,800 amount. And the multiplication of that percentage times that number is what the ultimate LAFCO fee is for any given agency. And it's often difficult to determine what that number is because we still have part of this year that we need to record and have actual numbers at the end of the fiscal year. And so there may be some additional applications that come forward between now and the end of June. We may come under some additional expenditures that we anticipate between now and the end of June. And at the end of the day, if you move to the right-hand side of that column, there's the net financial impact. Right now, we're anticipating roughly $15,000 as that impact, as a positive. So that positive number would be transferred into our contingency reserve. That contingency reserve, as we see today under this budget, we are anticipating taking $20,000 out of that to help offset the member agency's contribution. If we were not to do that and we just stacked that $15,000 back into our contingency reserve, and or we retain additional revenue and have less expenditures by the end of the fiscal year, our contingency reserve would likely exceed our policy amount of 50%. So the commission has a policy to keep a reserve somewhere between 30 and 50%. If we exceed that 50% top end, when the county auditor looks at that allocation of apportionment for each of the agencies, they will do an automatic credit to reduce our contingency reserve to that 50% mark. And they would receive a credit on that, and then the factor would apply to each of the agencies. And so it's often confusing as to how that number is derived, and it's difficult to determine until after the final numbers come in. So that's often why we don't provide a number to anybody. We don't want to misrepresent a number and then have the county auditor's office write the final analysis in the distribution letter to them that says what their amount is. And so that's kind of a little bit of how the budget is structured in some form or fashion. But right now, we think we're on a pretty good trend of meeting these numbers. It will never exceed the amount that we anticipate because we're always going to either have more money added to the contingency reserve, or we would just take contingency reserve to cover any net loss at the end of the fiscal year. And so the $560,000 will always be the max for any of the agencies. And if there's any specific questions about any of the line items and how we derived at those, we're happy to answer any of those. But in summary, that is the proposed budget, matches and mirrors what we presented as the draft budget. So again, we'll take public testimony and then have the commission direct staff to move the approved budget to the county auditors so they can derive the distribution list for individual costs.
Thank you. Are there any comments or questions from the commission, starting with Arvin?
So if I understand, the cities and special districts each pay their 1/3 of the whole on a pro rata apportionment, so the bigger cities or districts pay more. We don't know that until the end of the year, and the auditor uses that amount, and so we have to do it kind of retroactively.
Right, kind of, yeah. And so the other thing that's kind of unique about that approach is in any given year, any of those cities and special districts may report a different revenue number to the state. And so there could be an instance where you report less revenue, but so does the rest of the cohorts within that field. All other cities may report even less. And so your percentage pro rata still may be higher than the collective group. And your apportionment may end up being a higher fee just based on that. So it's sort of multifaceted. It's what you report, and it's ultimately what credit we might offer at the end of the fiscal year.
Nelson.
Yes, thank you, Chair Freeman. A couple questions about the budget. Some of the numbers that stand out that seem to be a little bit off of what the final budget for 23-24 was. One was the unemployment insurance. I see that's significantly higher than what was originally budgeted. And then next year, we're going to actually go down and that'd be about half of what we had originally budgeted for this year. So there's something going on there. Could you mind explaining that to the commission?
Yeah, so if the commission recalls, I brought together forward an item to change our payroll system, right? So ADP has been pulling out our taxes to pay to the state, and the amount they were pulling out were estimates, and none of those estimates were actually accurate. And in some cases, they didn't pay them at all, and we ended up having penalties and late fees as part of that process. So that was part of the rationale as to why I wanted to move away from ADP. Then we got into a little bit of a snafu of that because we had two California ID numbers that were assigned to us by the state. And having two ID numbers prevented another payroller from processing our payroll and paying appropriate taxes. So we have retained our services with ADP as our payroller as of now. And we managed to file a couple of additional documents with the state, some DE 1579 M forms and a DE 1PE form that we took to the commission. And with the help of District 3's office in reaching out to our state assembly's office, we were able to get the state to reclassify our ID numbers. We now have one ID number. And in doing so, they wanted us to back pay all of the taxes that we hadn't paid previously. And so we filed with the state those back taxes. And so now you see that lump sum. And prior to my appointment as executive officer, all of the commissioner stipends that were being paid out in past years was all part of state unemployment insurance. So we were paying unemployment insurance on each of the commissioners month after month. We managed to finally resolve that issue and take everybody off and only leave the 2 employees that are employees of LAFCO. And so we now owed all of those back SUI payments, even though technically you weren't an unemployed insurance personnel. But in order to rectify the issue with our state ID, we agreed to just resolve the issue and move forward.
Thank you for that thorough explanation. I think that's very helpful for the commission and the public to, if they're taking a look at these numbers. The other one that I had a question about was audit fees. We budgeted $12,000 for that. As of, 3/4 of the way through the year, we don't have any audit fees.
Yeah.
So can you talk about what we're looking at there?
Certainly. So we were under contract with Bartlett, Pringle, and Wolf to prepare our audit for 2022. We went out for an RFP to transition away and ended up hiring Davis Farr to do our 2023 audit, which they are actively doing now. But in doing that, we had a delay to our 2022 audit. And so we had an initial workload on that and payment to that. And then there was a delay into this fiscal year to get that complete. And so we didn't end up paying that final payment until this fiscal year. And that will then eventually show up. Okay. And so we got off track a little bit with our auditors and their invoicing and payments. But we hope to get back on track when Davis Farr completes our 2023 sometime this year.
Okay, thank you for those explanations. Thank you.
Any other comments from the commission? Maybe anyone in Santa Maria that we're, let's see.
Nothing here.
All right. Is there any public comment on this item?
Chair Freeman and members of the commission, we have no request to speak on this item.
All right. Well, in that case, I would entertain a motion.
I'll move to approve the final budget as directed by items A through C, as recommended by our executive officer.
Second.
Motion by Stark, second by Hartman. You can have a roll call vote.
Commissioner Guyer? Aye. Commissioner Hartman?
Aye.
Commissioner Kiriakou?
Aye.
Commissioner Patino?
Aye.
Commissioner Stark? Aye. Commissioner Williams?
Aye.
Chair Freeman?
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously.
All right. Next item is business item number 2. Will the clerk please read that item into the record?
Chair Freeman and members of the commission, business item number 2 is to consider support for Assembly Bill 3277 ad valorem bill.
Thank you. Executive Officer.
All right, thank you. So this item was a continuation from our last item. The commission directed us to forward this bill and the support letter to the county auditors for their review and opinion. Staff did forward that to the county auditor. They and their team looked at it and gave it consideration and returned a support of the bill and basically indicated that it would likely have minimal impact on them since there hasn't been a whole lot of cases that qualified under that bill in recent years. And so they had no real concern of that bill and its passage. So it's back on the commission's agenda for action to write a support letter for the bill consistent with Cal LAFCO's request. Any specific questions about the bill or the review? I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Commissioner Stark.
Yes. Could you briefly summarize what's included in the next phase? And my understanding is that some cities are to be included in this next phase of MSRs. Is that correct?
We are currently talking about the ad valorem bill
Oh, I'm sorry, the thing flashed and it said MSR program. It's the AI got me.
Commissioner Guyer.
This is- Well, I appreciate, it was probably on my request to talk to the auditor controller about this. I have a question, and I've probably for the executive officer and council. I'm a tad bit confused by the answer from the auditor controller. In my reading of this, the change in the Act of 56-810 is a singular change. But when the auditor controller, the response from the auditor controller uses certain cases, plural, my reading to it would be that there's only one instance, and that's that if a special district waived the property taxes, there would be no need for an analysis. So it's not cases, it would be case. Is that correct?
Yeah, it would be that individual case if they waived that. And I think when they pluralized it as cases, that meant multiple applications if they were multiply waived by the same entity or different agencies that waived that right.
Okay. And then the other thing is, I really feel that the auditor controller should be, even if it's a waived issue, the auditor controller should be notified of it. So is that still in the loop?
Yeah, that's still applicable. So when an application comes forward, our office generates the report and letter to the auditor's office to start that communication. And so we would indicate to them that it's either a waived situation or not.
Thank you.
Nelson.
Yes, thank you, Chair Freeman. And I just wanted to make sure for clarity purposes, so this does not invade the property exchange agreement that might be between a city and a special district?
Correct.
It's just if a special district or city wants to waive giving any taxes up or including themselves in the taxes there, they can just step away.
Specific to change of organization application.
Okay.
So if they already have an agreement in place and they're not annexing any additional property, but they want to renegotiate that, that's a separate process that's outside of LAFCO.
Okay. So this would not necessarily apply to new annexations into
The-
existing?
This would apply to new annexations where a district is annexing territory.
So that district annexes a territory, but they said, hey, we just want the land, but we don't want the taxes?
Yeah,
They'd be exempt.
certainly. There's a scenario most recently that we had was an annexation into the San Ynez CSD. When they annexed that Lucky Lane property, the predominant service that they were providing was sewer, but they do provide lighting service. They waived the lighting component of that because they basically indicated that they had enough revenue from their existing property tax allocation to cover these additional properties. So they didn't negotiate any further for additional property tax for lighting purposes, and that their sewer service was managed through their sewer connection service fees.
Okay, so de minimis value of any extra
Okay.
wasn't worth it to actually go
Right.
through that.
It's not
whole
worth it for
lengthy
them
process.
to negotiate and go through that process, so they can waive. At the time, they didn't have an opportunity to waive it, so they had to go through the negotiation process, and at the end, they waived it in that process, but that's the delay in getting to a hearing for that, where this bill is trying to aim at trying to streamline that process, where we can automatically waive it from the beginning, and LAFCO then can move forward.
Okay, that's very helpful. What's the length of that, sometimes that process takes? Just, I mean, we're cutting out months, we're cutting out years?
The negotiation process is 60 days with an extension of an additional 30 days.
Okay,
So
great.
ultimately, 90 days, we could take up that
Is the
that
negotiation
time,
period.
that negotiation period.
And what happens when a agreement can't be made within the 90 days?
If an agreement can't be made at the end of 90 days, we can restart that, or either one of those entities can file for a mediation process.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Any other questions, comments from the commission? Maybe someone in Santa Maria?
None here.
Seeing none, moving on to public comment.
Chair Freeman and members of the commission, we have no request to speak on this item.
All right. Anyone like to make a motion?
Well, it seems just like a cleanup bill. I mean, it's trying to make the process more efficient, and so I think we should do it, and I move staff recommendation that we support.
I'll second that.
Motion by Hartman, second by Stark. Are there any comments on the motion? Seeing none, moving on to roll call.
Commissioner Guyer,
No.
Commissioner Hartman,
Aye.
Commissioner Kiriako,
Aye.
Commissioner Patino,
Aye.
Commissioner Stark,
Aye.
Commissioner Williams,
Aye.
Chair Freeman.
No.
Motion passes 5-2.
Next item is information item number 1. Will the clerk please read that item into the record?
Chair Freeman and members of the commission, information item number 1 is to receive and file a status report on municipal service review program.
Executive officers report.
Thank you. We have a very brief PowerPoint, like one slide. So we are in the process of gathering information and writing our municipal service review for parks, recreation, and open space, and rentals facility services. This was the timeline that we set out in the course of the schedule for this. We have made some public outreach and met with some of the agencies to help inform them of how they can best provide responses. We have a note update. As of yesterday, we now have 11 received responses from the 18 agencies. And the remaining of those agencies I've been in contact with, and they are working towards providing those responses. So that's positive. Again, we often like to take the opportunity for anybody in the public that likes to watch, or any of the members that work for any of these agencies. If you go to LAFCO's website on our main page, we have a community survey that you can take to give your opinion about whether or not you think the services are adequate for these particular 18 agencies. So we offer that up, and then we ultimately respond to that in the service review. So with that, I would just report that we are on track of completing our service review by the end of the year. And if there are any questions about the process or the work we're doing, we're happy to answer anything.
Are there any comments from the commission? I think Stark had a question before.
Apparently, my bafflement was not due to the AI, but rather to some degree of confusion about what we are studying and how that relates to the cities that we're doing the review of.
The study is on all of recreation and park, open space, and community facility rental space from the cities and the special districts that provide those services. So that's specifically narrowly what we're talking about. However, as we've learned in the past, there's opportunities and challenges section and other sections that any of the cities can speak to about any particular changes that or struggles they might be going through that we can highlight so that the commission can be more informed when you're adopting ultimately their sphere of influence at the termination of all of these service reviews.
Any other comment? Oh, Melson.
Yes, thank you, Chair Freeman. So the MOA talks, that's kind of floating on top of this, right? Because that's going to be part of a larger discussion.
Yeah, that's a separate element of what we're working on as a workload item that will help guide ultimately where the commission will draw the sphere of influence boundaries for each of the cities.
And when do we expect the MOA conversation to heat up?
That's information item number 2.
Oh, sorry. Yep. Thank you.
And I'll answer to that.
All right, any other questions from the commission?
Just a quick one.
Oh, Hartman.
So is this our last MSR review?
We have one more. We'll do a miscellaneous. I'm not quite sure exactly what we're going to cover in that. Outside of, we still have cemeteries, the hospital, Lompoc Hospital. City-wise, we'll probably pick up broadband. I know we didn't do Santa Barbara's Harbor Department, so we'll probably pick up some of those miscellaneous services that the cities provide that we can talk about.
So do those in miscellaneous, any of them affect the SOI?
They will for the special agencies like cemetery districts, because they're going to be a standalone.
But cities in
For the cities
specific.
themselves, that miscellaneous service will likely probably not be the driving force of where spheres of influence ultimately reside by this commission.
So that's why the SOI discussion is coming here.
Well, that's why I think it was appropriate to start the MOA discussions, because I think at the heels of this, even with recreation and parks, it's probably not going to be a driving force. But we now have built in enough data information with the prior police, fire, water, sewer, transportation services, which would probably be a driving factor. We now have that approved and kind of in the books, so we can use that as informational pieces to help drive the conversation through an MOA.
That helps me understand. Thank you.
Any other comments from the commission? If not, do we have any public comment?
Chair Freeman and members of the commission, we have no request to speak on this item.
All right. No motion is needed on this item, so the next item is information item number 2. The clerk, please read that item into the record.
Information item number 2 is to receive and file a status report on Memorandum of Agreement program.
Okay, we are here. So this will be a brief update because essentially we've held some initial meetings with the cities. And we had fairly good feedback and conversation and support of moving forward with some concept of memorandum of agreement approach. The only city that opted out was the city of Guadalupe for obvious reasons that they stated. They have a coterminous sphere boundary around their existing city, surrounded completely by agricultural and other uses that they have no anticipation of growing in that area. So we accepted that determination and basically said, okay, we can carve them out in the future talks. Outside of that, the other cities have decided to move forward, at least in concept. As I said, we've had some initial one-on-one meetings between the county representatives and city representatives to kind of continue to talk about what an MOA can do, what it might look like, draw some initial conversations about general plan policies and what might be applicable so that we can start to build the information base in and around what an MOA might entail. And we haven't really gotten into the details of specific areas per se. That's kind of going to take a slow build into that. We wanted to take a measured approach where we got the conversation started and we got all the players kind of more accustomed and used to speaking with one another and kind of taking this measured approach into doing this. Ultimately, we'll see whether or not an MOA becomes useful, in particular in this particular go-around, if they can come to an agreement between city and county, and ultimately the city councils would have to approve those. Ultimately, the Board of Supervisors would have to approve those agreements. And if they can come to some sort of agreement, then that agreement would come before the commission. And we're giving ourselves roughly 2 years approach to try to take this before the commission in earnest has to adopt a sphere of influence for the cities. So we've given ourselves a little bit of time to kind of let this play out through the process a little bit. And then the commission would give that great weight as to that agreement. And in my experience, the most LAFCO commissioners have, when two parties have come together, you tend to agree with those, but it doesn't necessarily mean the commission has to as a whole. I will say if the commission does not agree to that MOA, then the MOA that got approved is null and void. And they wouldn't have to exercise any of that. So as I'd say, I think from my perspective, it's been positive. I think both sides have enjoyed the idea of coming together early on and taking this approach to growth countywide and being able to use some instrument of this kind to kind of help guide and make decisions in the process. So with that, that's kind of the shortened version of what I would have to say right now. It's ongoing. We continue to schedule meetings and hold these conversations with representatives.
Thank you. Are there any comments from the commission, starting with Kiriaka?
Thank you. It seems that we're coming up on kind of a momentous time for land use in our county, and it seems like this would be a really good time to see if we can embrace MOAs and make them work. My first question is there anything from a policy perspective or perhaps a best practices perspective that you could offer to us about how MOAs should work sequentially? So we have communities that don't have spheres extended very far. We have communities that arguably should have spheres extended a little further than they are currently. Do you have to do an MOA to get to a sphere? Can you do a sphere request and initiate that process while you are also engaging in crafting an MOA? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Kiriako, through the chair. I would respond in this way. The MOA is not a requirement. It's really a voluntary agreement between the two parties. It's encouraged through the Cortese-Knott-Hertzberg Act to bring the two together and try to come to an agreement. But that does not preclude any agency or any particular landowner from filing an application to amend their sphere of influence and ultimately annex a territory.
Okay. And would it be fair to say that if you're engaged in a sphere process and then you layer on an MOA conversation, that would give different public agencies the opportunity to really look at a long-term planning horizon for where services will be delivered by who, how will transportation work, how will a lot of these things that we're looking at in our current state through the MSR process, how those things might shift. Is that fair?
Yeah, that would be fair. I would think that's part of the benefits of an MOA agreement is through that agreement, language and provisions and development standards can be developed to help guide these individual communities on how they might make and approach these topics and may even change their general plan to some fashion so that they are anticipating the appropriate moves that they need to make. So that is the sort of reason why I think it's beneficial that we do it at this time. We've had some hearings on some communities that wanted some expansions and had some struggles with getting those through. They were given some direction about how they might approach that and how they might change their philosophy and how they're trying to seek expansion outward. Those elements can be brought into this type of an agreement, and it can be outlined so that that gives them some sort of direction as to what they need to do.
Okay. So right now we have, to my last question, I promise. Right now, in unincorporated areas, depending upon where you live, you may have a county planning commission or you may have a more of a regional planning commission that can be closer to decisions for design, intensity of land use, types of land use, approvals, or at least advisory. Would there be a way for MOAs to be part of a joint city-county process where you could start to plan for the possibilities? I'm not just talking about current RENA cycles, the next RENA cycle could be 2-3 RENA cycles down the road. But is there a way through an MOA process for cities to start, if they want to start moving into areas, or if residents in unincorporated areas want to start moving into incorporated areas because urban lot lines move or whatever the reason is there a way for the MOA process, which I recognize is voluntary, to be sort of a safe landing where the city in question, the county in question, can come together and have important, sensitive conversations about things like what would be the consequences of a site that we have in our inventory for housing going into another jurisdiction? How would we be made whole from a state reporting perspective so that people, like, for example, let's say if Carpinteria were to expand from a sphere to an annexation and there was a site, hypothetically, that's part of that, is there a way for the county to assert its rights to ensure that RENA credit stays with the county while the land use decision is made by people that live closer to that project? I'm using that as a hypothetical because it's not in my city.
It's very a little specific to that.
Yeah.
I would answer it. The MOA can go as far as the two want it to go.
Okay.
So you got to keep that in mind. It has to be agreeable from both sides, right?
Okay.
So a city may want more than what the county is willing to offer, or the county may want more measures than the city is willing to give in that. So we will take it as far as the conversation, but it is a landing point to which to have the conversation initially. I would think, because this is sort of embarking on a first round of an MOA agreement, that they probably be structured a bit more general in nature and not so specific, geared towards more trying to establish a framework from which to work from.
Okay. Thank you.
Stark.
Yeah, oh, there we go. My question is, were you able, when you talked to the respective cities, to get a consensus as to the issues that ought to be covered in an MOA? And I guess a related question, were you able to ascertain any sort of a best practices list for MOAs for any source?
Yeah, so in our initial talks, we are not completely there yet. We intentionally steered away from diving into the real issues that will likely be on the table, because we wanted to start slower and build more of a bridge of communication with both city and county members.
So would it be fair to say that at this point what you have? Well, we good. Oh,
Give Commissioner Stark a lesson in this.
no. I think I'm a technology dropout. That's on my
The red light is hard to see when you're talking, but when it's on, you're on.
Thank you. Would it be fair to say that what you have gotten so far as a result of your talks is some willingness to explore the concept of an agreement, but not necessarily reached any advancement as far as the understanding of what the substance of those agreements would be at this point? But the only no that you got was from Guadalupe, because apparently they don't need it. Is that correct?
That's fair. That would be my assessment at this point. I would also caveat that at any point, these agreements can kind of dissolve themselves, and either side can walk away from the table. So we're cognizant of that. So that's why we're taking a more measured approach, because these are kind of new, and we haven't fully delved into how these might come about ultimately to the public knowledge and to the representatives of the city councils and the board of supervisors. Ultimately, each jurisdiction has their own kind of unique approach that they will need to take to start to reveal what these talks will ultimately yield themselves to become. And right now, it's just way too early to kind of get to that point, and we're nowhere near where these things are going to come to city council members and the public. We're way early in the process of just agreeing in concept that we can come together and talk.
Thank you.
Any other comments from the commission?
Supervisor Hartman.
Wait, what?
I think Commissioner Hartman was ahead of me.
Oh, did you have it?
Yeah, I often forget to turn my light off, so you never know when I really want to talk. So if I understand the MSR program that we're finishing up now and the sphere of influences, that's for, we expect that sphere to be good for, it's the timing issue that I'm trying to figure out here.
Yeah, for our cities, when we wrap up our next MSR, the miscellaneous MSR, again, probably trying to follow the same timeline at the end of the year of 2025, we will bring back to the commission resolutions for adoptions for spheres of influence for the 8 cities. So that's late 2025, maybe early 2026 adoptions of their sphere boundaries. At the time, we hope to have, if applicable, an MOA that will attach to that, in which we can have kind of a defined boundary for the commission to consider. If those MOAs dissolve through the 2-year process, then the commission will be up to its own information pieces using the service reviews, the prior 5-year service reviews, looking at the journal plans of the cities and the county, and other pieces of information that at the discretion of your commission to determine what is the best sphere boundary for that city. You make that decision, we'll call that early 2026. That will be in place for probably 5 years. We'll start the next series of fire, police, water, sewer, transportation. We'll go through this exercise again in another 5 years. We'll come back around, and at the end of that 5-year period, readopting spheres of influence for the cities again. So every 5 years, or as needed, we will amend spheres of influence for the cities.
So the MOA discussion would feed into the second 5-year sphere of influence adjustment, or would it be a longer-term 20-year lookout?
The sphere adjustment is a longer year look at, with the opportunity every 5 years to fine-tune an MOA to address anything that may have come up within that 5-year period.
And then I think you've already alluded to it, but I think one of the things the commission was really interested in that comes out of this, and you'll get to it in the next item, but where is good to develop, where isn't good to develop, and see if we can get some agreement around that. It inherently is a very political decision, and so it's being kind of teed up in a technical way, and I think that's where you start. Whether it would be advisable to have ad hoc committees of some of the electeds at some place down the road, so that it just doesn't run into a brick wall because of things that it hasn't looked at or considered, might be a good idea.
Noted. I think we'll probably get there at some point when we get enough meat on the bones to understand what it is, what are the issues, where are the hangups, where can't we come to an agreement, and are there ways to get around that? And then at that point, we may end up needing some ad hoc committees to help iron out and smooth out some of those disagreement points.
Apparently Nelson?
Yes, thank you, Chair Freeman. I just wanted to offer my enthusiastic support for this. I think that there's a lot of conversations out there that haven't happened in decades, and this is an opportunity to do that. I think we all want to get to some level of understanding, but sometimes there's other priorities that jurisdictions have, and that gets put on the back burner, and we never get to have a formal process to do this. So I just want to, give an attaboy to you and your staff for pushing this forward, and the commission, because I do think this is going to be good for the county. I don't think that a lot of times that we're that far apart, and if we really could just put everything on the table and start to look at things from a holistic point of view, that it's amazing what we might be able to get done. That sometimes gets lost in the bureaucratic mess and turnover of staff and things like that. And so I think having a document that outlines some of those concerns, and maybe even areas where we're not going to come to agreement, right? And that we know that those are going to be things that are going to maybe change by what the city council looks like in the future, what the board of supervisors looks like in the future. So I think this is a really good opportunity, and I really wanted to thank you for embarking on it. And like all things, 2 years sounds like a long time, but I'm hopeful that but these are decades in the making. So actually, it's a rather short amount of time, and I hope that even by starting these conversations, that we might run into annexations and other issues that we can resolve in the next 2 years, because at least we're sitting at the table together. We're, instead of lobbying shots, in meetings or in the media or whatnot, that we can, or in letters. So we have an opportunity to do that now. So again, thank you, and I really support Commissioner and Supervisor Hartman's idea of having eventually some ad hoc discussions as well.
Any comments in Santa Maria? Is there any public comment?
None here. None here.
Thank you.
Chair Freeman and members of the commission, we have no request to speak on this item.
All right. Moving on to information item number 3. Can the clerk please read that item into the record?
Information item number 3 is to receive and file a status report on Sustainable Agricultural Lands Conservation Grant Partnership Program.
Thank you. Executive Officer to report.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Again, another item that came out of our work program that the commission adopted back in January was to go out and solicit some partnerships in trying to seek this SOLT grant opportunity. So we've held some initial meetings. We did a kickoff meeting with a number of groups and found support amongst a large number of variety of interested parties. And so with that, we've taken an opportunity to reach out to some technical assistant folks that work with the state and to bring this forward to an additional county climate ad hoc, a subcommittee group as well, with the goal of trying to refine our partnerships and ultimately solidify kind of a core team that we might want to move forward with. And then within that core team, identify appropriate roles, who might be an official applicant for the grant, and different assignments that come along with that. And so that's kind of where we're at. We're still kind of in the early stages. We've outlined what the grant deadlines are. A more formal application isn't really due until next summer, so kind of timing-wise works out great for us to be able to kind of iron out some of these early issues, utilize some technical assistance to help kind of formulate a solid application for this. And ultimately that scope, if you will, from a LAFCO perspective, we wanted to use the knowledge of these sites that might be best suitable for development and best suitable to be protected, and use that to inform where we might draw our spheres of influence.
Thank you. Any comments from the commission? Stark. No. Oh. Hartman?
Will you be hiring a grant writer to help us put the grant together?
That we don't know yet. The goal is to band together with a bunch of other smaller entity groups that have experience in this, and to determine whether or not individually we can roll up our sleeves and do this work ourselves, or if we need broader assistance to that. I think when we get to that core team, we'll know where the talent in the room is and who has the bandwidth to put the sweat equity into the grant application.
Thank you.
I will note that if in the event this comes out and LAFCO ultimately steps at the helm of this and becomes the applicant to that grant application, that will be coming back to the commission if that's as a formal request to be the primary applicant. So you will definitely see that again. I anticipate once we get a core team together, I would invite that core team to this commission, introduce you to the work that we're doing as a team. So you'll get more information in smaller increments as we move forward.
Now, Stark.
What is the source of the money for the pot of money that we're trying to get a grant for? And is it secure from future state budget cuts?
That is an excellent question. I wish I had the answer. I believe it's tied to climate committee in the state, so it's probably something related to that as far as the source of the funding. We could probably look that up. But it is secure funding. I do know that, and we are now into the 10th round of this funding. And there's two components to this funding. One is the planning grant side, which is sort of what we're seeking at this initial stage. And then they have acquisition funding money. So if you've identified some suitors, both willing to either preserve their land or place some sort of instrument over their property, that individual groups can team up with them and acquire those rights or acquire their property with the use of some of this grant funding, as likely maybe a second round if this is proven to be successful for us to identify these types of properties and have a recipient on the other end that's willing to do that.
Thank you.
Any other comments from the commission? Maybe in San Maria?
Nothing here.
Moving on to public comment.
Chair Freeman, we have no request to speak on this item.
Thank you so much. Next item is information item number 4. Will the clerk please read that item into the record?
Information item number 4 is to receive and file a report on file number 24-01 for 801 Poinsettia Way, annexation to the Goleta Sanitary District.
All right. Executive Officer report.
All right, so we have received an application for an annexation. It's been quite some time since our office has actually taken in an application. So this is the start of that process. When it comes via petition from the landowner, we are to put it on the first available agenda to notify the commission that the application is in. And we also notify the Goleta Sanitation District as the annexing agency taking it in. And that starts a 60-day clock for them to provide us with information. And ultimately, if they determine that they cannot take the property, they can terminate this application. We have not seen that. Generally, the district has been supportive of it. We've received letters of can and will support letters from the district, so we anticipate this will be moving forward through the process. And generally, these take anywhere from 90 days to make it through a full hearing or so. So you'll see this back later this year.
Very interesting. Any comments or questions from the commission? Maybe in San Maria?
Nothing here.
Moving on to public comment.
Chair Freeman and members of the commission, we have no request to speak on this item.
All right. Next item is commissioner announcements. Do we have any commissioner announcements or any requests for future agenda items? Hearing none, we will now go to executive officer comments.
Okay, I don't have any further particular comments, although I did send out a summer schedule in which we anticipate canceling both June and July. So enjoy your summer vacation over that. But I think at the end of this meeting, we would still continue, adjourn this meeting to the June meeting, in which case we will file the proper notice for cancellation if that is indeed true.
Makes sense to me. Thank you so much. And with that, I will say we are now adjourned to Thursday, June 6th, 2024 at 1 p.m. in Santa Maria.